Yeah, so we are talking about Fangirl, and I just have a few questions for you, and then we can talk. And the way that the film is shot, sometimes it suggests that Nat is like talking to the audience. Was that an intentional nod to like a vlogger feel?
Absolutely. It was kind of a twofold thing of like a vlog or a YouTube channel, but it was also shot in a way that was kind of like either a docu or a mockumentary style. And we did it as deliberately as possible. Like my DP, Xing Mai Deng, who's super talented, we talked a lot about different framing options and different color schemes with it. So like, if you'll notice when she's speaking directly to camera and she's basically talking to her audience, she's very much front on. She will face camera, she'll talk directly to camera. The actress that I was working with was amazing, and at the time was 15. It was so unnatural for her, but I would tell her, like, please spike the camera, like look at dead in the eye of it, talk to me or talk to the sound guy, and it's okay. And she had a really hard time at first. She was kind of uncomfortable. But we did things like framing techniques, like she's either quite close up or kind of like a loose medium. And I think only in the playground scene you see full bodies, but when she's by herself, it's very much as if you're either looking at a YouTube channel or like a mockumentary. And it's also like very washed out with cold blues and things like that. And it was to kind of give this idea of like, is it all in her head, or is it something, or are people really following her and have a keen interest in this thing that she's really into? And I think it's kind of speaks to that teenage experience of like, she's very self-obsessed, like she's kind of self-involved is what I'd rather call it. But yeah, so then on the flip side, we were very conscious to create very like mustards and yellows and oranges within the family scenes, because I felt like it was kind of a like fecund kind of teaming feeling. It wasn't like quite right. It felt a little bit sickening, but it was much more traditional coverage. All the shots were much smoother. We had like a movie, we had some Steadicam work, and then whereas the other side was all handheld, things like that. And then if you notice, and maybe this was a little too subtle, but I really loved it, the aspect ratio changed. So you have in the family scenes when she's actually speaking to other people, it's much more of like a 16:9 traditional framing box. And then whenever we switch into the different worlds, I honestly don't even remember the exact sizing, but it's a much smaller sizing, and it's to kind of trick your brain into understanding that we're in two very separate worlds for her.
Okay.
So it was fun to play with.
Awesome. I mean, it totally felt like that. Like, I mean, it came across like that when you were watching it. I don't know all the technical things about filmmaking, but I can feel those, like I sense that stuff. And
I mean, that was the point, was to make it as subtle as possible, just to make your viewer, make the audience kind of shift into their thinking and feel like, oh, we're in definitely a different space. And I'd also kind of played with having the quote unquote filmmaker speak to her directly in her own world. And in the end, I had a bunch of like feedback on it. And in the end, it kind of answered a question that maybe shouldn't have been answered. It was like, maybe leave it up in the air of whether or not she's kind of slowly descending into her own obsession or her own self-involvement.
Okay, I like that. Yeah. Can you talk a little bit more about what it was like to work with a teenager as an actress? And
absolutely, yeah.
Did she identify at all with the world that she was portraying, or so out of her?
What was crazy was, so Laurel, very talented lady, she was 15 at the time of filming, I mentioned, and so I was really prepared to like in-depth, like get in there and be as almost coddling as necessary, and she just didn't need it. She was so on point, she was so on fire, and like she achieved like a vulnerability very easily, but it's also because we became very close. So we had rehearsals together, and her mom came over, and like, I mean, to the point where before all of this craziness with quarantine, like I had lunch with them not that long ago, a few months back. So we formed a kind of friendship. And so it was very easy for her to get vulnerable very quickly, despite her age. And I think I auditioned like 65 girls. Like it was a lot. There was like, I had a few hundred submissions come back that were interested. And then I went and I saw in person 65, and Laurel was number 2. And there was just something about her that like, she stuck at the first, she just understood it. She understood the language. It felt really natural coming out of her mouth. I didn't need to coax that from her. It was a way in which she just kind of adopted that language very quickly. And what's crazy is she just couldn't be further from this girl. Like, she is not Nat at all. So I was really astounded, because the more I got to know her, the more I was like, wow, you are reaching in yourself and pulling something out that like I don't see on your surface, which is, you know, it was pretty astounding to watch.
Yeah, that's pretty impressive for a 15-year-old. Like,
it was nuts. I was floored, I won't lie. Like, whenever we were watching different takes, and I would just, particularly, there's a bedroom scene where she gets very vulnerable, and it's just her like this. And I went on for like 5-6 minutes every take, and she would do something new and interesting and nuanced every time. It was great.
wow. I love when she walked into her bedroom and it was the camdom. I was like, that was the room as a teenager, except obviously not Cam. But I will not mention who I am like a total fangirl for. But yeah, no, that was me as a kid. And I was like, oh my gosh, I am horrified to think of what I would have been like with social media. And I don't know what that's doing to our kids. And what made you want to explore that?
I think to a degree it was kind of that sentiment almost exactly, which was, I had this idea of me being like a certain way, and when I was a kid, you know, or when I was of that age, which was like, let's say between 11 and 14, you know, and I thought I was so into something, and I thought it was like a healthy amount of obsession, like I was cool, you know, it was fine.
Yeah.
And then I think looking back on it, I'm like, well, maybe it wasn't okay. And what would I have been like had you something like Twitter, where there is like a direct engagement, or there's a possibility, let's say, of a direct engagement, and what is that doing? And I think it's really, at least, you know, in my opinion, it's really allowing our society, and like, you know, you and I as individuals, but also very much people that are much younger than us, allowing them to prioritize and make a real importance of not just fame, but like the idea of celebrity, you know, and making a name. And I mean, point in case, we have a man in office right now that was in reality TV not that long ago. Like there is a certain, like, this is a true thing, you know, we are as a culture becoming more and more obsessed with what fame and celebrity can do. And I think that, you know, me as a teen, I don't know if I would handle it any better or any worse. And I think it's an interesting kind of tool that we have these days that kids are having to deal with and adapt. And I think that was just the motivating factor there. That was something that I found interesting. And there's this idea that like, there are certain problems, I would say, that of a girl of that age of 13, 14, 15, the general culture doesn't take very seriously. And I kind of wanted to bring an importance to that and bring like a brevity or like a levity to it. Do you know what I mean? Like,
yeah,
some importance.
Because I mean, when you are that age, I mean, it's your world.
Absolutely.
I mean, everything's important. And the things that you love are so important, and you don't understand that they're not going to be as big of a deal when you're older.
No, I mean, there's one line that the sister character says, and she's like, trust me, this will pass, or not a big deal. And like, that was me, you know, that was me with my little sister of like, please just grow up. And I think it was just such a brush off and so damaging at such a heartbreaking time for her that I think you have to kind of remember, like, be kind to those younger than us, because we were just like that, you know?
Yep.
And it was something that, yeah, I found really, really interesting.
Okay. Yeah, I know, like, it's so I didn't have an older sister, and I didn't have a younger sister, so I'm an only child. So I didn't have like that dynamic. I had nobody telling me that I was going too far. I had nobody, but I also didn't have the internet. So yeah, no, it's so fascinating.
But the important thing is like, she doesn't think she's going too far, right? You wouldn't have thought you were going too far. I think that was kind of the whole thing, is like, she's the protagonist of her own show.
Yeah.
The Nat show, she can do what she wants until it just becomes a little dangerous, a little bit like leans into self-harm in a way that's like not terrible, but pretty much.
Yeah, no, like the fight scene, and like, oh my gosh, I'm just like, oh, would I have done that? I don't know. Like, it's so weird to think about how it's changed so much. And like, it seems like when I was a kid, and I would love for you to talk a little bit more about this too. Like when I was a kid, in the mid 80s. It was in maybe early 90s. It was just so innocent. Like, it was like, I love somebody, and it was so innocent. I wasn't hurting myself. I wasn't hurting others over this. I wasn't, yeah, it wasn't that. It was just like, I love somebody so much.
Yeah, no, I think I felt that way too. I, grew up in, I'd say I was at this age, like late 90s-ish. And I mean, I remember like this, I will date myself, but like Tiger Beat and like JTT. And I was super in love with Leonardo DiCaprio at the time. It was my, like, a thing, and it didn't feel wrong, or it didn't feel obsessive to me, because again, it was like, that's normal. But yeah, I don't know. I think that coming up now, it's a different kind of importance kind of put towards that, if that makes sense,
Yeah,
but yeah.
that does make sense. When you were making the film, you might have already touched on this a little bit, but were you more interested in cementing the perspective of Nat, or were you more interested in the people watching her?
Totally. I think, well, what I tried to do with the aim was to really walk this very fine line. When you first see her, and I'd argue maybe the first half of the whole piece, she's not sympathetic, and to be honest, she's a bit pathetic, and you're like watching at her, you're like laughing at her. Yeah. And maybe not in a terrible way, but in a way that you're kind of being judgmental as the viewer. And that was truly intentional. She's not a character that you totally get behind, because when you don't understand her motivations in a way, particularly if you're older, like, why would you even get involved in that? But I think, and what my intention was halfway through-ish, and particularly by the time we get towards the playground scene, that your perspective shifts with her, because she's been quite complainy for the majority of the time. And it's a lot of like, woe is me, and I'm a victim, and this and that. But then once you get into the playground scene, and you actually have a flash of her dad, and this kind of lack of relationship that she has with him, there's a real insight into how lonely she truly is. And that, for me at least, and what the aim was to try and get you behind her and get you on her side, to better understand that, like, okay, it doesn't matter what this thing is, it's important to her. And she's really hurting because it's not important to anybody else. And she's kind of alone in that, but also she's kind of alone in her own family life. And I think that was another reason why I chose not to include any friend characters. Like, it's only her three family members. We have a fight at the beginning, but it's
Right.
fast, it's quick, and she's like, she mentions a friend of hers, but no one ever directly reaches out to her. And so the dad scene, for me, at least, the intention was to get a shift so that the audience, so you as a viewer, were no longer like looking at her or watching at her. You were like looking with her, and you were kind of behind her in it, if that makes sense. I'm like articulating that correctly. So it was an intentional shift, or an intentional like perspective. I really tried to get you on her side. I think from the beginning I alienated, and then towards the end I was like hoping you were sympathetic at least.
Yeah, no, I definitely felt that shift. And there was like, I mean, yeah, like I definitely felt like I didn't have the same issue as she did. I had friends, and I had like, I have a great dad, but it's like I needed the connection to something bigger when I was younger. And I think that's, I don't know, like that's like another way of looking at like the obsession with celebrity. And it's just like this, like I needed something.
Yeah, you needed outside factors to kind of pull you out from yourself. And I think that maybe she was in a position that she didn't have that.
Yeah.
Where people around her, or this character particularly, was just kind of overlooked. And that's not a negligent thing, like that happens, but at the same time, she's just a kid, and she's, the character is like 14 years old, and she's kind of trying to grow up in this way and not truly being able to connect with the people around her. So that was something that I really wanted to not only explore, but like kind of actively have my audience almost not against her, but almost dislike her, and then have a very, very slow shift, which is why, I mean, we can both kind of agree it's not a super plot-driven story. It's very much a character study. But my goal was to get you behind her, to kind of see past this idea of like, oh, she's a little pathetic. It's more like, no, she's just kind of misunderstood. She's just very lonely.
Yeah. I think you did a beautiful job with that. I mean, I think
Thank you.
Totally made that shift is so clear, but also it's subtle too. It's like, oh, okay. Like,
I mean, I feel like the heavy lifting was done by Laurel, to be honest. Like, I didn't realize when making it or even when writing it that dad scene would be so particularly poignant. And I even had lines in there. And when we came down, I have a friend of mine who is an amazing editor, and she's like, you know, on Stranger Things, and she works on What We Do in the Shadows, and she cut the scene together without any dialogue, and she made it just so fast. And I was like, no, we spent so long, and I love that diner. I was so like blind to that scene. I loved it, and I was like, the colors were great, the art was great, I loved everything about it. And she was like, no, like, just watch. Like, you don't need it. It's right there in that moment with one look. Just watch it. And I was like, oh, why are you this good? Because I missed the scene.
It's like wonderful to have like amazing editors that can come out and like
see that.
Like,
very much a less is more moment that I was not happy about.
Well, it works beautifully. Yeah, no, I just like, I can't wait for it to screen. I can't wait for more people to see this. And yeah, I'm super excited about it.
I'm so excited that you guys chose to include it. Really, really honored, for sure.
It was lovely meeting you.
Absolutely. It was so nice to meet you.
Well, do you have anything else that you want to like throw in, like an extra?
I'm not sure about the film,
like how, like,
I don't know.
Yeah, I don't know. Anything that you're like, I mean, you don't have to. You know,
I will say there's one thing that I'm really excited about right now. It's not actually to do with this film, but I just co-produced a series for Quibi, and it's streaming, so that's fun. If anyone wants to check that out, it's called.
What's it called?
It's called Don't Look Deeper. It's with newcomer Helena Howard, John Cheadle, and Emily Mortimer, and it's really cool. So I know Quibi's like still finding its legs as a mobile platform, but it's like a super show. And Catherine Hardwick directed it, whom I worked with for like many years, and so I think everyone's very proud to have been on it. We're really excited to put it in the world.
That is so exciting. I can't wait to see it. I'm like, I don't think I've watched anything on Quibi yet, but
it's super new. It's really finding its legs, but yeah. I've watched a couple of things on it, and it's a really different and interesting experience. So I'm hoping it'll catch on. It's really fun. It's cool.
Cool. Okay. I'm sorry. I'm always like the short but sweet. It's short and sweet.
No, I love it. I'm down.
Yeah, no, I'm like, this was awesome. And thank you so much for doing this today.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, like I said, I can't wait to screen your film and for more people to see it. So
well, thanks for talking to me today.
Yeah. Have a great day.
You too.
Thanks.
Bye.
Bye.